Hey everyone, welcome back. Icon here. Thanks so much for checking out another episode of Esports Analysis. Today, we are hopping on board with ENVOY as he and the Chicago Huntsmen go to battle against Silly, Assault, GodRx, all those dudes from the Minnesota ROKKR. I will say one thing real quick before I get into this one, that I've taken a little bit of heat recently just because I feel like Minnesota has everything that it needs to compete with Atlanta if they were to meet up again in a grand final this weekend in LA. Who knows if both teams will even make it that far, but I just feel like Atlanta and Minnesota, they're definitely the top four, right? They're both in the top four. Atlanta would obviously be one, but Minnesota's got to be somewhere 3 or 4, somewhere in there, depending on what Dallas does this weekend also. So I took a little bit of flack on my last podcast because of that, saying that I think Minnesota can compete with Atlanta. It's just the way that I feel right now. If they can't, then I want to see that proven this weekend. Also, some people said that I just said that because we had midnight on our podcast. That's not true. It's just how I feel. And if you haven't seen that podcast, I'll put a link down below. It's me, Kingdom Soldier, talking about LA this weekend with Midnight from the Minnesota ROKKR, old school Optic Midnight. She was our guest this weekend. So go check that out if you haven't seen it already. With that, as we get into the actual strategy, you can see that on screen we're rotating back from P1 to P2. As ENVOY goes down there, you can see that nobody from Chicago's really pushed up, right? They're spawning in this mid-map area, and this is a really nice job from Minnesota of getting those kills out in kind of towards the middle of the map before Chicago can go ahead and push in and contest this. And then now, if you look at the kill feed, ENVOY got a kill, Scum got a kill, and now whatever battle is happening inside the hill. So they've done a really nice job of pushing in, being able to contest. They still haven't been able to overtake it, that's just something that Minnesota can do, right? They have such slaying power that even if you do overtake it for a second, they have the slaying power at that SMG position to get in and to be able to contest and take it back over. So really nice job there from Assault of getting inside and contesting for like 10 or 15 seconds, because if he doesn't do that, now all of a sudden as this hill comes to a close, you're now down like 40 to 21 instead of only 29 to 21. So nice job there just towards the end. As it rotates back towards P3, you can see that Chicago is pushing over towards Woods. That's a strategy we've been talking about recently on this map. Just to break it down for a moment so everybody's aware of what's happening at the moment, you can see that ENVOY is pushing over towards BDOM. So up above ENVOY's head, there is a mini-map there, and we just left P2, and we're heading over to P3, right? We're heading over on this side. Now, most of the time, or as what might make sense, right, as common sense would say, if you're going from 2 to 3, the quickest way to do that is to go through BDOM and take this route right here. That's exactly what ENVOY did. Now, the only reason why he did that is because he's trying to set up a pinch, because he's the last person coming from P2. So what the rest of his teammates did, they went all the way through P4 out here over towards Woods, and essentially what they're trying to do is flank all the way around back P5. And if you can get this spawn, then that's the spawn that you want to have as it rotates from P3 to P4 to P5, especially when it gets to P5, because that's one of those hills where you can really max out a lot of time. So as we go ahead and play this again, if you're looking at the mini-map in the top left-hand corner, so the actual in-game mini-map for ENVOY, you can see that all his teammates have pushed out P5. And then essentially all ENVOY was doing right there is he was just trying to get the cut, because essentially they were successful at spawning Minnesota out. And then now it's just kind of up in the air, right? Now everything is just developing in real time. So there's a little bit of flanking going on both ways. ENVOY did still come up back here at P5. So if you're a Chicago fan, that's good. But on the reverse hand, they were able to, so Minnesota was able to contest the majority of that there. So there was about a 20-point lead as you left P2, and that's probably going to be about the same, right? Somewhere in that 10-second range as it goes to P4. Now, as we rotate to P4, I'll go ahead and I'll erase all these marks that are on top of the mini-map right above ENVOY's head. And as this happens, this is a really clutch play right there from ENVOY. So it didn't seem like it, but a lot of teams have been doing this, where they've been trying to get bullets on people as they cross mid-map there. So again, we're in P4. I'm drawing on it right here. if you're Chicago, you want to hold down this back spawn. So you have to have somebody over towards P3 holding down that flank. And then what ENVOY was doing is he was mid-map on this head glitch. And essentially all he's doing is watching this cross right there. And if he can get bullets into people while they make that cross, then that bodes well for his teammates that are inside the hill, right? If you're inside the hill and those that are running at you are half health or maybe even lower than that, then you stand a better chance of being able to lock down that time, because essentially when Minnesota was spawning over here, they're trying to rush through here. So the only way to really combat that rush is to try to get bullets down mid-map, get them weak so that as they get close to the hill, then they're easier to kill. And then also, Minnesota would also send up somebody over here through BDOM, and that's why that somebody on that left-hand flank by P3 is important, because if you give that up, you're going to give up spawns to P5. So they did a pretty nice job of locking that down. As it rotates back towards P5 on this back warehouse side of the map, you can see that Chicago did lose spawns. So that's a fantastic job. Let's see where ENVOY spawns. ENVOY spawns all the way outside by minecart over here by BDOM. So that was a phenomenal job of Minnesota of just pushing through over towards P3. Essentially what they did is they slayed out inside of P5, and now once you have control of P5, you can see Silly just got a 3-piece right there. There was somebody else in the kill feed. I couldn't exactly see who it is, but once you have control of this hill, it is really hard to break through and counter what's going on inside that hill. Now, I'm not sure if I love ENVOY pushing forward right there, just because as it rotates from P5 to P1, now you want to flip back to that original strategy that we talked about in the beginning of this video. You want to be holding down for P2, right? So I'm not sure if that's going to cost them or not, and it looks like it is. So I'm watching the minimap in the top left-hand corner, and as those blue arrows are coming up off of spawn, they're spawning back by P5. So rather than try to push for the last few seconds of P5 there, what Chicago should have done is they should have just backed off, set up the chokes, and held down the opposite side of the map spawn so that as it rotates from P1 to P2, they are in position that they need so that they can lock down that time for P2. So now, essentially, you can see that nobody's really going for this time on P1 because it's not all that important. What is important is flipping spawns here if you're Chicago, or holding spawns if you're Minnesota. So as we have 10 seconds left in the top middle of your screen, the great thing about scrims is that that gives us the ability to listen in to exactly what they're talking about in terms of strategy. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn up the volume a little bit. Let's listen into what they're saying. I'll still talk with you guys here and there because I do want to point out the things that are most important. But in the meantime, let's turn up their voices so we can hear exactly what they're talking about.
Right.
Got me back right, got it.
And he's mid tracks.
Back right,
Made that guy?
So got RX with the 3-piece there. They're doing a really nice job of, again, 30 seconds has come off of this hill, and Chicago is just now pushing up inside of the hill. So Chicago did a fantastic job, or Minnesota did a fantastic job of getting those kills mid-map so that you could slow the push forward from Chicago.
I'm about to just go.
They all went behind it.
You can go.
Yeah, I'm working for the back.
And now ENVOY's kind of playing that opposite role, right? Rather than push through BDOM, he's the one that's now pushing through mid-map or the left-hand side of the map. They're trying to push out warehouse and get spawn. This is the role that you see ENVOY play a lot. ENVOY almost every time on rotation from P2 to P3 is the one that's pushing out warehouse, trying to lock down these spawns as it rotates back through to the other side.
Close dead. In the back there is.
So right there, you just heard him talk about it a little bit. There had to have been one other person back there in P5 that was just hiding back there from Minnesota, because they didn't push out all the way towards the back of there. So if they push out the back of warehouse and there was nobody left, they would have had those spawns. But you could see when ENVOY got that 2-piece and I believe somebody else got a kill, they didn't spawn them out. They didn't spawn on the opposite side of P3 towards Cole. So essentially there was still somebody from Minnesota hiding in the back there that they didn't take care of, which is why the rest of Minnesota is still spawned back there, and why ENVOY, when he died right here, he spawned on the opposite side of the map over towards P4.
I got one. Open dead. I got two.
ENVOY is so good. Those kills are so hard to get, and he just pulls them off routinely. It seems like he's always making plays like that.
I'm going up top.
You have to kill me, old brothers.
Yo, D4 is set. D4 is ASIM.
They killed me on the
Now, if you're Chicago here, you have like a 30-point lead. You could get the last 50 seconds over in P4. So it's not necessarily as important to flip here going into P5. Sure, you still want to, but if you can get 40, 50 points on P4, then you're set up pretty well moving forward through the rest of the set of rotations.
He's on oil and ramp. Oil and ramp.
Oil dead, oil dead.
Mid-box,
Ramp
mid-box,
dead.
Alex, mid-box.
Nice, I spawned close.
And this is just a really nice job from Formal, from RC. That you can see right there, a three-piece in the feed from Formal. They just didn't let them anywhere near P4, and this probably might have backfired a little bit. Actually, now that we're watching this, ENVOY turned around, and Minnesota's coming from behind them. So I don't know if they got spawned out or if somebody tried to pinch, but as I'm watching, okay, so I just saw blue arrows come up on this right side over here. So it does look like Minnesota was able to hold down that P5. We'll see if Chicago is able to break it here.
I'm trying to come up with yours.
Trying to shoot me. Yeah, shot my fucking foot.
P5, P3.
Oh, behind me crates. Good job.
P3 weak, assault.
I'm just going. I'm helping you the back. Whoever this Alec, I'm with you.
Nice
Yeah,
job.
I got two on the back. I got
Nice,
two
I'm
on
here
the
with
back.
you. He's front door. He's like boxes or side. Good job.
Break.
And with that, it looks like these spawns have flipped. So right now, Chicago has control of P5. There's 34 seconds left, so they can essentially get to about 246 if they were to hold down the rest of this time here. And if you're Minnesota, you're just having a hard time getting into the current hard point from that B-Dom spawn location.
I spawned forest. Yeah, he's in you. I'm in bathrooms.
And now if you're Minnesota, you really can't afford to give up a ton of points here as it rotates back to P1. So this makes them vulnerable to giving up spawns for P2 just because they can't afford to just sit back now because essentially Chicago will just hop the flag. And if they're able to get all of this time right now, they only need 9 seconds to win. So now the strategy for Minnesota switches up a little bit because they can't just lay off of P1.
Another one crate.
In you. I needed you.
You control the play this whole time.
Yeah, he's crates. Below you crates. Nice, good job. I'm helping you crates.
One is you. Come on, let's go.
I have your crates. One shot crates, Seth. One shot crates.
Looks like they need 2 more seconds, and that's the issue right there, is that if you're able to slay out, just get one set of team kills on P1, then you don't even have to worry about rotating towards P2. If you can just get one set of kills, then now all of a sudden you can get 10 or 15 points, and since they only need 9 as it rotated from P5 to P1, they had all the setup that they need to capitalize and get the W on P1. So as we look at kills right here, I'm a little bit surprised. Let me pause this for a second. That's a heck of a game from ENVOY, 36 and 23. This is what this kid just slays out all the time. But I'm a little bit surprised. Looks like ASIM down below was 17 and 30. Maybe he had an off map. It is what it is. That happens to everybody. Got Rex also a little bit slow, but the rest of them performed fairly well. So I will say overall this scrim ended up going about half and half. So they won some of the maps. So Chicago won some, Minnesota won some. Most of those matches were pretty close. This is one that's a little bit more spread out. But I'm excited to see Minnesota as they go ahead and compete in LA this weekend. So if you're new around here, thank you guys so much for the support recently. My channel's been doing unbelievably well, and I appreciate you guys so much. So if you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you have any comments whatsoever, put them down below. I love the interactions. I try to get back to every single person, so I will try my best to get back to you. Most of the time, I get back to everybody. Leave a like before you head on your way. Help the channel out a little bit. And with that, we will catch you on the next episode.